The cyberpunk genre has always been one obsessed with the allure of the future. Yet underneath all the bright neon lights and chromed out bodies, these stories always contain a warning. A warning about what can happen to society when we become so obsessed with our technology and pushing the limits that we risk losing what is most important, our humanity.
The danger of AI is much greater than the danger of nuclear warheads.
I have memories, but they're not real. They're just implants.
You look lonely. I can fix that.
She doesn't know.
I am a living, thinking entity who was created in the sea of information.
She's beginning to suspect, I think.
Suspect? How can it not know what it is?
Commerce is our goal here at Tyrell. More human than human is our motto.
I want more life, Father.
If we gift them the past, we can control them better.
Memories. You're talking about memories.
In 2024, an annual international art competition titled Art Prize was held in Grand Rapids, Michigan. This is a competition dating back to 2009 featuring artists from around the world. This particular piece of art by John Katterberg, titled Dynamic Sunset, was the winner of last year's competition, and he took home a whole $125,000 for his efforts, which is pretty great salary for one work, I'd say. Here is another prize piece in comparison, this one being the winner in the digital arts category at the 2022 Colorado State Fair Fine Arts Competition. This one, titled Theater d'Opera Spatial, I definitely butchered that, by Jason M. Allen, is a very different style than Katterberg's Sunset, yet actually received way more critical acclaim. Now, the comparison here is that this is more critical acclaim, because this piece was actually created, unsurprisingly, with Midjourney, a generative AI platform. Many of you may have recognized this image as soon as I showed it, but for those of you who didn't, were you surprised? Can you even now look back a couple seconds and really truly say that you would be able to tell the difference between this quickly digitally created work of art and the sunset that surely took days and days of painstaking human effort? If it were me, I don't think I really would be able to, and clearly most people couldn't, since it really did win that award without being recognized as AI until after the fact. And that was 2 years ago, and now in 2025, the conversation of generative AI specifically is, all over the place and is one for a separate time. But my point here is to pose this question. Without knowing the difference, what really separates these two images? Sure, it's easy to point out these small and tiny minute issues with the second one once you know, but if it were a fully human-created work, people would surely defend any issues and just say it's artistic decisions. So again, when some of these pieces are so incredible that you wouldn't even know the difference without being told, it begs the question, why does it really matter? Because if a program can quickly create something that, at a surface level glance, people can appreciate just as much as work a human spends hundreds of hours on, that should be a good thing, right? More art for more people to appreciate and be inspired by would only be a beneficial problem to have, you would think. And if art and creating and even humanity was simply about that surface level, then I'd say yes, absolutely, it's good, even a great thing. But that is not the case. What this generated image lacks from its human-created counterpart is something that you may not quite be able to see, but is arguably something that is the most important part of art, creating, and humanity. It lacks soul. What truly makes any type of art unique is the human aspect of it, the passion and life experiences and soul that is poured into this one singular work. And here, in the futuristic dystopian nightmare of the cyberpunk genre, the question of humanity is always front and center. It is a genre where every single part of humanity can and will be altered by technology, and in some cases, even something as sacred as your soul can be digitized and preserved in a code to secure your future. But when we arrive at that point, what exactly is left to separate the individualism of humanity from the terrifying sameness of technology? In other words, it's the age-old question of Theseus's ship. When all the flesh and bone and spontaneity and beautiful imperfections are stripped away, does what remains still retain its humanity? And more so, what defines that humanity? I don't necessarily have an answer, and that's not quite the goal of this video, but the cyberpunk genre offers many a take on this question. In a world full of rapidly advancing AI products at the front and center of all of our lives, and I believe will only continue to be more so, I think it's an ever-pertinent question to ponder. So sit back, grab your hot drink of choice, and let's take a look at what we can learn from the terrifying reality of the cyberpunk genre. In the 1968 novel, Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep, we see a post-Earth humanity living among the stars in societies where owning androids, or Andes as they're called here, have become extremely common. Side note here, the different slang for tech and androids vary widely in each cyberpunk world, so, get excited for that. In this novel, the protagonist is tasked with retiring rogue androids who have strayed from their programming in what is a sense of simply, glitches. In this seminal take on the genre, we see the question of humanity presented as empathy being a key distinction. It's one of the primary ways to differentiate androids and humans is a test aimed at measuring a range of emotional responses, because the assumption is that if one was an android, they would be unable to exhibit empathy, but as this novel progresses, that seemingly does not appear to be the case. Now, if this plot sounded familiar to you, that's because it would eventually inspire Blade Runner, arguably the most well-known piece of media in the cyberpunk genre. Pretty much every piece of cyberpunk work since then has taken inspiration from Ridley Scott's neon-soaked film, complete with its ponderings on where humanity blurs the line between the creation and the created. Blade Runner largely follows the same themes as this novel, and the same plot even, seeing Deckard, the protagonist, be an android/replicant hunter faced with the same conflicting questions, and honestly even more so than the novel it's based on. It is important to note, however, that replicants in the Blade Runner universe and even in the original novel are not your typical androids that you would think of, but are actually really bioengineered humanoids instead of, fully machines. And they're made as essentially a slave race, for lack of a better term, for humanity to work on their off-world colonies. This distinction is a really important one in the film's themes, being in line with the main corporation, Tyrell, and their goal of creating something more human than human, and blurring the line between what really separates humans from replicants. As Deckard is tasked with retiring a rogue replicant named Rachel, he comes to see that she actually has arguably more of an emotional depth than humans around her, eventually, but more so just really desires an answer to her meeting more than them. Upon their initial meeting, she doesn't really showcase emotion, but deep down she has all these questions and all these things kind of beginning to bubble to the surface. And of course, this kind of throws Deckard for a loop, and not only does it cause him to question his job, but he also begins to question his own memories. Because part of what makes Rachel here so special and different than some other replicants is that she has these implanted memories that seem so real to her that she doesn't even initially know that she is a replicant. And this causes Deckard to begin doubting his own humanity and his own memories. And while it's not made entirely clear in the film, it is eventually heavily implied that even Deckard himself is potentially a replicant, and that at the end of the day, this separation of replicant and humanity lies in a couple things, but primarily the actions of the individual, what they strive for, their yearning, their meaning and motivation to live, versus an ambivalent indifference to it all. Because we see the owners of the corporations and all the higher-ups being more emotionally closed off than even the replicants. However, it's not just this emotional depth that the film poses as pivotal to the humanity aspect. It's memories, a concept that the sequel actually delves into a bit more. In Blade Runner 2049, the main character Kay is, much like Deckard, a rogue replicant hunter. Unlike Deckard, however, he himself is a replicant and he is fully aware of that fact. When coming into contact with the first one in the first few minutes of the movie, the rogue replicant says this to him.
How does it feel, killing your own kind?
To which Kay responds,
I don't retire my own kind because we don't run.
This is an interesting distinction because Kay at this point in the film kind of believes that he is different, or at least has been conditioned to do so, believing that these rogue replicants are truly defective instead of able to become something more than they were made for. Because as Kay knows he is a replicant, he also knows that his memories are false, implanted ones, yet part of him still questions if those memories could be real. This questioning of his identity is what the corporations want to stop replicants from doing with their baseline tests, kind of keeping replicants in check, making sure they're not kind of developing empathy and emotions or whatever it may be. Because that is really just one of the most human things that they could do, and without spoilers, it is a question that is very, very important to the rest of the film. The importance of memories in the world of Cyberpunk 2077, though, is one that has, unsurprisingly, been distilled into a commodity known as braindances. Braindances, or BDs as they are abbreviated, allow anyone to experience any memory from someone else, be it an intentional experience like a concert or going to the moon, or a more personal recorded memory that feels so real it could be your own. This way of allowing anyone to experience the recorded memories and sensations of others really blurs the line between your real memories and false ones. If you don't have the money to attend a concert, you can just buy a cheap BD and it's like you're really there. And the main idea behind this to me is within the context of memories, as BDs are just these commodified memories. With Blade Runner, we see the massive importance of memories in both replicants and humans, but in 2077, the implication is that even something as precious as memories aren't out of the question to be bought, sold, digitized, and altered, all for the sake of entertainment. Because it's not just the raw memories being sold, there are whole jobs to edit and refine a BD for commercial use. So in that case, what you've received as a true memory isn't even that in the first place. This extreme commodification of even a person's memories in 2077 is in line with everything else in the game's universe, but seems to be a stark difference in contrast to how important they are treated in the Blade Runner universe. But really, is it that different to sell memories as experiences to the masses than to implant false memories into these created human replicants in order to better control them? Because in either instance, the same result can be found that I think that when a human mind, and by the extension of the body, it stops being treated as something sacred, it instead becomes yet another mass media canvas for technological advancement. Back in the world of Blade Runner 2049, we see a more personal look at humanity through an AI called Joy, who is designed to adapt to its owner and even love it. In this first scene she's introduced, Kay gets home from work and she's even made him a simulated dinner while chatting to him about his day, how he's doing, all the things. Joy as a product is marketed as being whatever you want her to be, and able to cater to the preferences of the individual. And Kay really likes her, and you can tell that just through the way he talks and looks at her. So much so that he buys a device that allows her to be brought with him anywhere, as she is previously confined to the tech of his apartment. The first thing they actually do together is in this scene where they stand in the rain, which is something that is typically an incredibly human experience. And joy here is a very strange thing to behold, as it is both real and artificial. Artificial because obviously she has no nerves, she is essentially a hologram and she has no way to physically sense anything. And real because in a sense she is actually emotionally responding to the idea of feeling. So the question then becomes, if Joy feels like and responds like a human, does it matter if she's made of code? It seems Kay thinks it does matter on some level, as his responses to Joy throughout the film always shows that he of course does very much care about her, but also internally acknowledges the falseness of it all. Even in just his looks, he tends to look at her with a happy sadness in his eyes, and I take that as both his real love and appreciation of her, and deep knowing that this version of her is not real and is obviously incredibly catered to him, despite him wanting it to be real. Just in these looks, you can see the underlying kind of acknowledgement that she's just a manufactured form of what he wants her to be. And spoilers here for the movie, but in her final moments, she hurriedly tells Kay that she loves him before the device that houses her is crushed in front of his face. And as emotional as this is, it's hard to know whether this moment was a true pseudo-emotional response because she had begun to evolve beyond her code, or it was just the best option her programming presented her in the moment. This extreme advertisement for joy Kay passes later on seems to lean toward that latter answer, I think.
You look lonely. I can fix that.
There is one other aspect of Cyberpunk 2077 that I want to look at, and it mainly deals with the replacement of the human body and soul instead of dealing with what is inside. If you're unfamiliar, the main MacGuffin of Cyberpunk 2077 is a device called Soul Killer, which is like a digital engram shard that can be slotted into someone's technological ports on the back of their neck, but this particular shard can house a person's soul. And in this case is Johnny Silverhand, and this engram ends up being slotted into your character's brain. The main idea and premise of Soul Killer is this whole promise by the big mecha corporation Arasaka to quote-unquote secure your soul, an idea that Johnny is very, very against, for good reason.
Corps have long controlled our lives, taken lots, and now they're after our souls.
Might be right. Can't really argue with you there.
V. I've declared war not because capitalism's a thorn in my side or out of nostalgia for an America gone by. This war's a people's war against a system that spiraled out of our control.
This concept is one that implies the only part of you that is human, that is sentient, is the soul and should be treated as sacred enough to preserve. But when preservation by technological duplication is the solution, is the soul really being preserved? And more so, is the original humanity even intact? This question is one that it seems Arasaka was trying to sort of answer in 2077, not only through Johnny, but sort of accidentally through his partner Alt Cunningham, where Johnny has his memories more or less intact, and he often feels as if he is more real than your created character who is a human. Alt Cunningham is virtually without her memories, as she was a person but is now lost in the net of cyberspace as a shadow of her former self. How this happened to her was kind of a long story, but she essentially was trying to do something against Arasaka and more or less maroons herself into this cyberspace, and it's only a small fraction of herself. When interacting with her in the game, she states that she does know Johnny from the vague memory Alt had, but has no connection to him, and is simply a construct left of the original.
The Alt Cunningham you strove to save in Arasaka Tower no longer exists.
And realistically, Johnny is the same, just at a much higher level, to the point that if he took over your character's body, he would essentially be fully human again. But at that fundamental level, Johnny is still a copy, not the original. This idea of completely ignoring every aspect of the human body except the memories and a soul in order to preserve it is such an interesting concept. Because as Johnny says, if you let a corpse take and preserve the last part of you that they can, you're essentially surrendering the last part of you left to the whims of those who simply want to push commerce. Like the Tyrell Company and Blade Runner, who see replicants as a product instead of something full of life, much of the messaging around AI and humanity in 2077 boils down to something different than the other cyberpunk genres we've talked about. Where Blade Runner and even Ghost in the Shell, although I didn't really mention it much, are much about the themes of what exactly makes something human, which is extremely prevalent in our current day and age. 2077 wants you to desperately preserve that humanity at all costs, but being wary of those bright, alluring neon promises offering salvation.
Not a single thing in this world isn't in the process of becoming something else.
I love this genre and all the philosophical questions it continually asks, but discussion and debate on topics such as these aren't exactly very beneficial if we can't take anything away from them. In fact, that's kind of the whole point of the cyberpunk genre, even from its origins, is, like I said at the beginning, to serve as a warning into our future and hopefully prevent people from making these same mistakes that these fictional characters do. When any topic becomes prevalent in society, I think it's very important to be able to look at examples of what could happen if things are handled poorly. And in the case of the cyberpunk genre, that is exactly what it can do. Not only as that warning, but as sort of a cautionary look at the innate problems humanity has and will continue to have regarding pushing the technological limits despite consequences. When Blade Runner 2049 released 8 years ago, the idea of an artificial partner being at home to serve as an all-supportive being was still pretty far-fetched. But now, we have a plethora of chatbots you can talk to, and it can talk back to you in whatever voices you want, much like Joy's customization. And already we're seeing young teens and others be affected by this very negatively, as they very quickly form a pseudo-relationship with any chatbots, both in friends and in romantic ways, which for anyone more emotionally or mentally vulnerable could have dire consequences, and unfortunately already has, as just in last December, only maybe a month and a half ago, a 14-year-old boy took his life after falling in love with an artificial bot with the goal of finally being able to be with her in some sense. And obviously, like I said, something like this can be much more dangerous for anyone who is mentally and emotionally vulnerable through either different illnesses or just, being a teenager. But I say all this not to scare or convince someone that artificial intelligence in any form is bad or going to completely ruin society, although it might, but to show how important it is for us now to be active and aware going forward. I know a lot of large companies are currently leaning heavy into generational AI just because it's the current trend, but much like the iPhone and mobile phone craze before it, I think this is one that will be sticking around and only be getting infinitely better and more dangerous with time. I mean, the iPhone has only been around for 18 years, which feels like way longer, and still large portions of the world have yet to grapple with its effects on daily life, and particularly for the younger generations, you really still don't know how to handle that. So we are certainly not ready for whatever the future of human-like artificial intelligence is, not by a long shot. All of this to say is that I think the cyberpunk genre is and will continue to be a point of interest for those looking to the future of humanity, both in seeking where society could be and to be wary of the dangers that it will hold. And looking even further ahead to where a real replicant or engram-like technology comes around and we are faced with these questions of both it and our own humanity, I don't have an answer for that. Even after all these musings and continued consumption of the genre that I will absolutely be doing, I still have yet to read some of the classic books like Hardwired and Neuromancer and watch a lot of Ghost in the Shell. I still feel like I'm even further from having a definitive thought on what would separate an android from a human in a way that would, appeal to everyone. But what I do know is this. To bring it back to those two pieces of art from the beginning of the video, I'm quite certain that no matter how seemingly advanced and lifelike any cyberpunk-esque technology becomes, I firmly believe that just like this work of art, nothing can replace the unseen aspect on display, the human soul behind it all. And that is certainly worth keeping in mind for whatever the future may hold.
All those moments will be lost in time. Like years in rain.
Hey everyone, thank you for watching the video. I really appreciate it if you got this far. If you got this far, you are truly incredible, and I very much appreciate you taking the time. I hope it gave you some things to think about. Hopefully it wasn't too down and scary for the future. If you're like me and super interested in the cyberpunk genre, there's quite a few stories and things like I mentioned that I wanted to include in this video, but I didn't have the time exactly to really delve into and let them sit. That includes Hardwired and Neuromancer, which are two pretty seminal books from, I believe they're both from the 80s on the cyberpunk genre. Another great novel for the Cyberpunk 2077 fans, if you haven't read it, is No Coincidence. It deals with a lot of cyberspace and net runners and all this kind of concepts that are really, really incredible. There's a great audiobook version of that on Spotify. I think it was for free, and it's voiced by the voice actor who did a female V in the game, Cher Muley. So it's a great listen and a great just read. Let me know any of your favorite pieces of media in the cyberpunk genre. I am always on the lookout for more. Let me know your thoughts on humanity and artificial intelligence and all the things down in the comments below. Next video is going to be on Outer Wilds and the incredible nature of that game. So if you're interested in that and more video essay content, be sure to stick around. And I hope you have a fantastic day.